Have you ever had a problem that was just so complicated, so messy, you had no idea where to even start explaining it? It's a feeling we all get. Whether you're dealing with a personal crisis or looking at a huge global challenge, that struggle to turn total chaos into some kind of clarity is universal. So today, we're going to dig into why getting organized is about so much more than just a tidy desk. It's about actually getting things done. All right, let's jump right into a really high-stakes situation. Picture this. You've got a serious legal problem. You need help, and you need it fast. So you sit down to contact a lawyer, but you immediately hit a wall. How do you even begin? Should you write this long, detailed letter, or just pick up the phone? The advice out there is, well, it's a mess. So you go looking for expert advice. And what do you find? Complete contradiction. On one hand, you have a legal commentator on Stack Exchange saying flat out, do not write a letter. They basically argue it's a waste of time and you should just get on the phone. Okay, sounds simple enough, right? Well, not so fast. Because on the very same forum, another expert, David Siegel, gives you the exact opposite advice. He lays out a whole structure for how to write that perfect letter. Situation first, what you want second, legal stuff last. So now you're just stuck. You have a real serious problem. And the very first step, just explaining it, is already a maze of conflicting advice. And that right there is the heart of the issue. When the stakes are high, the last thing you need is more confusion. You don't need a debate about communication theory. You need a clear way forward. So if even a simple letter isn't the solution, what is? This brings us from a communication problem to a system solution. We're going to look at a medical malpractice case where the records were a total disaster, but the truth was hiding in there all along. And here's the big idea. The best way to explain a really complex chain of events isn't with fancy words or a persuasive speech. Nope, it's with cold, hard, organized facts. In this case, the answer was something incredibly simple, a timeline. Now, what's so powerful here is how this just cuts through all the noise. Forget a huge stack of confusing medical files. Here, we have a clear, step-by-step story. January 5th, a patient shows up with pain. Just 2 days later, a serious flesh-eating disease is confirmed. Now look at March. On the 12th, lab results clearly show an infection. But only 3 days after that, the doctor writes the infection is resolved. Then, boom, in April, the patient is right back in the hospital. The timeline doesn't just suggest a problem. It makes the potential negligence impossible to ignore. And that is the power of having a system. You take 100 pages of jargon and chaos, you apply a simple structure like a timeline, and all of a sudden, you have a story that anyone, a lawyer, a judge, anyone can instantly understand. You've created clarity. And this whole idea of turning chaos into clarity, it doesn't just work for personal problems. It scales up, way, way up. So, we've just seen how organizing facts can change everything on a personal level. But what happens when you take that same problem and you scale it up, like to the size of an entire country? It's really the exact same challenge, just on a massive scale. On one side, you have one person trying to make sense of their own life's data. On the other, you have a government trying to do the same thing for millions of people, organizing everything from taxes and business permits to healthcare and social services. And this giant organizational project actually has a name. It's called e-government, but it's not just about, putting a few forms online. The real goal, as the United Nations defines it, is to use technology to actually improve public services and ultimately make life better for everybody. So how do we even know who's doing a good job at this incredible task? Well, for the last 2 decades, the UN has been running this massive global survey, basically grading and mapping out how countries all over the world are doing. You can think of it as the world's digital report card. So let's take a look. What does this global report card actually tell us about the state of our digital world? First off, the sheer scale of this is amazing. The 2020 survey looked at all 193 UN member states. That gives us a really comprehensive snapshot of how governments are serving their people in this digital age. And the results, well, they show a huge divide. This chart lays it out in plain numbers. In the top countries, almost all of them, 93%, offer a full suite of online services, like paying your taxes or starting a business online. But look at the low-performing countries. That number just plummets to only 13%. So who's at the top of the class? This table gives you a little sample of the countries in that very high group, and you see nations from all over the world. The US, Australia, Iceland, the Republic of Korea, all of them showing a really strong commitment to digital public service. But remember, these rankings aren't just abstract numbers on a page. They represent real systems in the real world. We're talking about the digital backbone that helps manage traffic in smart cities, the platforms that deliver critical health information, and the websites that let you actually engage with your government. But, and this is a really big but, the UN report makes it very clear that huge challenges are still out there. There's this persistent digital divide, which means access to all these great services is deeply unequal. The lowest-ranked countries, for instance, are mostly in Africa. And the core problems are often a lack of basic infrastructure and the simple, harsh reality that poverty can completely lock people out of the digital world. Okay, so we've gone from a personal legal mess all the way to a global UN survey. Let's bring it all back home and ask the most important question of all. Why should any of this actually matter to you? And the answer, honestly, is pretty simple. This isn't just about tech or bureaucracy. At the end of the day, good e-government means a better, easier, and more transparent life for you. It means services that are designed around what you actually need, not how the government's org chart is set up. It means using open data so you can see where your tax dollars are going. It means creating tools so your voice can actually be heard in policymaking. And maybe most important of all, it means making sure that absolutely no one gets left behind. And that really gets to the whole point of all this. This powerful quote from the UN survey itself says it all perfectly. The tech, the data, the rankings, they aren't the goal. They're just the tools. The real goal is making life better for all of us. So we started with the chaos of a single personal problem and saw how a simple system, a timeline, brought incredible clarity. Then we saw how entire nations are tackling that same exact challenge on a global scale. So I'll leave you with this thought. What chaos in your work, your health, or your life is just sitting there, waiting for the right system to make it all make sense?